wild beast. Sometimes they were bound to crosses and stakes out in the middle of the Colosseum and other places and left completely defenseless while these wild animals would come and attack them. It was really a very horrible situation, and we can very much say that they devolved. The games devolved under the Romans. And we just have to state very clearly that it was about death rather than life. And even these so-called athletic contexts in ancient Rome, what was going on there even bled over, sorry for the pun, it wasn't meant that way, but it even bled over into the theater. And that the people, again, criminals, those people who were thought less of in the Roman experience and government, these people that they wanted to do away with, they were forced to play in the plays, in the theater, the roles of the people who had evil done to them, even death, even being skinned alive on stage. And so even the theater, the art world, so to speak, was characterized by this brutality. And these people that would come into the Colosseums, they would be paraded in front of Caesar. And they were to say, "Hail Caesar. Those who are about to die salute you." And this is what they were to say to Caesar. And if they didn't, they were killed on the spot. At least if they could survive, they might survive the gladiatorial battle. And when one particular gladiator would have another one down on the ground, often it would be the last two, he would put his sword up to Caesar or to the crowd, asking for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yeah, you thought it started with Pandora or some other apps in your world. No, the thumbs up and thumbs down stems from this. And if that gladiator who had the last victim on the ground, do I run him through with the sword? Do I cut his neck? Emperor, thumbs up, thumbs down. Crowd, thumbs up, thumbs down. Sometimes the crowd would beg for mercy. You get a sense. This background picture of this particular slideshow that you have is of the ancient Colosseum. And you can see that all the walls and all the little bits of hallway, these were the underground. And what you can't see today, because it doesn't exist, was that there was a floor that was above all of that. And these were the cages of the wild animals. These were the cages of the people and the prisoners. And then they had trap doors that came up through. And then they were released. And they came out in this huge arena. And this is where the battles and the blood was shed. And literally, what covered this floor was sand, so that it would absorb the blood and the gore. And it was easier cleaned up and taken away until the next battle. All right, so we are in a short series here of trying to help us understand our modern day theology of competition and sport by looking at how it was, in these very brief overviews, how it was envisioned by the Greeks and the Romans. And we've made the case now that the Greeks tried their best, as much as they could from a humanistic perspective, to make the games good and wholesome. The Romans made no pretense of that. And where this was sportsmanship for the Greek, it became gamesmanship. I'm going to win and survive at any cost. And where we're going to go from here is we're going to take a brief look at the Jewish perspective. And all of this will help us understand the different perspectives in our day and age, the 21st century, about how people look at the integration of faith and sport, and then how we are to design our sports outreaches and our fitness ministries and how we are to think about this in a very pragmatic way. That's all coming. Thanks for joining us for this particular video on the ancient Roman integration or lack of integration of faith and sport. Thanks for joining me. Okay, now we're going to take and go to a third one here, and this one will be on the Jewish involvement in sport. And this will be done via a comparison of the three. Okay, here we go. Welcome back to this series for the AGON Institute of Sports Ministry and in conjunction with Barclay College. This is on the Theology of Competition in Sport, and we are winding down on a third of three segments here, talking about the integration of faith and sport. We've looked at a humanistically based ancient Greek world. We've looked at a very hedonistic view of the ancient Roman world. And now we're going to take a look at a more religious view, and that is of how did the Jews look at sport. And you have now a set of PowerPoints for those of you that are taking this for your class credit that you need to take all the notes, add your perspectives. So if you look at your first slide, the Jewish involvement in sport. The Hellenistic games were introduced by the Romans to break the Jewish religious strength. And Herod built many very, very impressive athletic facilities. We know that Herod built a great temple. We know that he built a great palace or two. One of the most amazing builders of the era, in fact, of all time. But why was he trying to do games if he was really Jewish? Because the Jews were not inclined at all to be involved in athletics. Well, he did it to try to break some of that Jewish stronghold, if you will, to get them away from their strong faith and more into the secular or Roman culture. And right away we begin to see a practical application that much of our movement away from Christianity is a result of sport. There was a time in which there was no sport played on the Lord's Day. And then it started to move into the professional ranks and then into the college ranks. It's only really been about a decade and a half or so that the collegiate athletes started to play their games on a Lord's Day. And now, closely following on that, high school games are now played. And now, any games are played on Sunday. And in fact, some of our own churches and some of our own paraministries have gone this direction. Out of a good-hearted, a well-motivated understanding that we've got to go reach people that are playing sport on Sunday. But in order to totally do this justice, you're going to have to pay attention to when we talk about the Lord's Day and Sabbath Day and how it impacts our view of competition in sport. But I think you all can agree with me at this point that the pragmatics of it is that there are far more people playing and watching sport on a Lord's Day than are actually in church. That didn't used to be the case. And so the method that Herod and the Romans used millennia ago is still in play today. Antiochus Epiphanes really started pushing the games towards the Jews as early as 175 BC. So much so that it was recorded that even the Jewish priests began to neglect their duties of sacrificing, etc. Of course, then it was a Sabbath day on a Saturday, hastening to the arena to the great dismay of many faithful Jews. And again, Herod built amphitheaters, hippodromes. Hippodromes were the places for the horses. A hippopotamus is a water horse, and so hippo means horse, and the dramos meaning the track. So that these tracks, he built these. And he held great sports festivals every 4 years in honor of Augustus. Okay, now I'm going to have you look at the second slide, and you're going to see 3 different lists: the Greek, the Roman, and the Jewish. And on the far left, you're going to see that there are the various concepts that we are going to look at. And we're going to compare these 3. Let's just look at these. What was the civic and religious goal of the athletes, of the athletics? For the Greek, it was freedom, that we are free to compete